AmourologyEd, where we do sex and alternative lifestyle education. My name is Krista. I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about intersex. I do have a short announcement to make though. If you watched my last video, the one on two-spirit, I did have somebody contact me and say, some of the things I said were wrong, which happens. So thank you so much for contacting me. The person that actually did, I'm going to be interviewing about it because they come from this background. So, and actually I love that. Like, I don't claim to know everything, and sometimes there's misinformation out there, and when we were talking about it, we were talking about how a lot of the resources I used and a lot of the papers and essays out there are tinged with the colonial perspective. So it's really hard to wrap your brain around that type of stuff. And I love that. So if ever you see something that you disagree with or you think is wrong or you would like to correct, please let me know. I'm totally open for that. The goal of this show is to get people the best possible information, and my ego has nothing to do with that. So thank you so much. You can be looking for that interview next week. I would like to get out as soon as possible so that the information is out there, and then we'll kind of continue on our trajectory. But today we're going to be talking about intersex. Yay! So intersex is an umbrella term used to describe somebody who has one of or multiple of several different variations of sexual characteristics, and we'll kind of get on with that. It's a really broad term and kind of confusing because it can mean a lot of different stuff, and I think there's a lot of information out there as far as what it means that isn't accurate. For instance, to describe somebody who is intersex as having both male and female anatomy, completely incorrect. It is possible for somebody who is intersex to have a version of male and a version of female anatomy and potentially have both in some sort of form, but in general, there are lots of other things that could consider somebody intersex. According to the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, anybody who's claimed as intersex is somebody who does not fit the typical definition of male and female bodies. And we'll get into what that means. But that's just kind of a broad term used to describe a lot of different things. In biological terms, sex may be determined by any number of different factors that may be present at birth. And I say that kind of lightheartedly because while they may be present at birth, some of these things you may not necessarily know that you have until puberty, until you go to reproduce, or ever. Some of these things include the number of sex chromosomes you have, so XY versus XXY. The type of reproductive organs you have. This includes ovaries, testicles, uterus, that sort of stuff. Any of those types of things that may be internal or external. This also includes sex hormone levels. And people whose characteristics are not either all typically male or all typically female. Some of these intersex traits are not always visible at birth, which we've kind of touched on, but for instance, you can have internal anatomy that nobody knows about, or maybe people know about it and they just change your anatomy, and we'll get into the ethics of that in a second. But it's a really interesting thing to think about that somebody may not know that they're intersex ever in their entire life, or may not know, their family may not know until they were autopsied later. Or you may find out when you go to reproduce and find out that you're sterile for various different reasons. So it's really fascinating, and it's not just a black and white picture of, oh, this is somebody who has male and female anatomy. That's not accurate. I would like to take a moment here to make a disclaimer that when I talk about infertility as an adult, not all people who are considered intersex are sterile. There are definitely people out there that can have a child in one form or another, and that just depends, like everything, on all the different factors. Being born with one or more of these traits that makes someone intersex is actually incredibly common. It is estimated worldwide up to 1.7% of people have intersex traits. This may not seem a lot, but put it into perspective. So 1.7% of people is actually about 2% of the population, which is actually the same amount of people who have red hair. So, chances are, if you've met someone who has red hair, you've probably met someone who is intersex. While the concept of intersex does actually have very real biological differences from the norm, we as people decide what those differences mean and where we draw the line. So we decide where the category of male ends and the category of intersex begins, and where the category of intersex begins and the category of female begins. And it's so arbitrary. It's just this construct that we've just decided on. Think about it this way. So if you've been watching my videos, you know the concept of the crayons. We have lots of different colors in this box. We have different spectrums of blue. We have different spectrums of orange. But they are all blue and they are all orange. And sometimes society says, okay, this is blue, but this is blue-green. And this is red-orange. And we have to make these distinctions in order to have a language to describe what is happening or what we see. But it's still a construct. We have still just made that shit up. And so sometimes it's completely ridiculous what we're calling these things. On that note, intersex people may describe their body and gender as being intersex, and they may not. It's totally up to them because it's a societal construct. So you can have a non-binary or male or female or any of the spectrum of gender of someone who is also technically intersex. And again, what does that mean? What is technically intersex? History hasn't always been kind to the idea of intersex people, but it has been around a long, long time. In fact, there's evidence of pre-modern cultures and ancient cultures having referred to people as having both male and female or a combination anatomy. So an example of this is a Greek historian, Diodorus Siculus, wrote of a mythological hermaphroditus in the 1st century BCE. Long friggin' time ago, who was born with a physical body which is a combination of that of a man and of a woman. And this person, this mythological creature, possessed supernatural properties, which is kind of cool. I like to think of intersex people as having kind of supernatural properties. I think that's awesome. Historically, intersex people were referred to as hermaphrodites or congenital eunuchs. This is no longer an acceptable term. Hermaphrodite is considered to be misleading, stigmatizing, and scientifically specious. So it's no longer used in even textbooks or anything. Please don't use the term hermaphrodite unless, of course, you're an intersex person and you want to reclaim that. I'm not going to tell you you can't. Now, history throughout the ages has also had a lot of different laws for male and female, and this should come as no surprise to you unless you live under a rock. The point is, though, is that there's also been different laws for intersex individuals because, well, it's confusing. Especially if you're going to, say, not allow women to own land. So, in European societies, for instance, Roman law, post-classical canon law, and later common law referred to a person's sex as male, female, or hermaphrodite, with legal rights as male or female depending on the characteristics that appeared most dominant. What does that mean? Most dominant. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you could have entirely female reproductive organs and have testicles on the outside and be considered a male? Okay. The term intersectionality wasn't coined until 1917 and was done so by Richard Goldschmidt. However, it wasn't until the 1940s when it was suggested that hermaphrodite be replaced with the term intersex. This was done by Coadius. I am not sure I'm saying that correctly. I could not find a pronunciation. If you know, let me know. People with intersex traits are still heavily discriminated against in today's society even. It's not just a historical thing that's happening. Some of the ways that we discriminate them are in education, healthcare, employment, sports, public service. And then there are even scarier things like infanticide or the killing of children before they're a year old. abandonment or just stigmatizing the families themselves. Now, also among this are surgical changes to the outward genitalia or inward genitalia without the child's consent, because children can't consent, or going through hormone replacement or hormone therapy in order to make the child more normal. Luckily, this has become a huge human rights issue in the last couple of years, and in the last decade in particular. But, and thank God, because there's some really, really scary stuff that happens during these procedures. In fact, these surgical or hormonal procedures have no evidence of favorable outcomes. That means that we're doing this genital mutilation or changing of a child's sex or gender without actually doing anything positive. What the heck? This is so bad that surgeons have pinpointed intersex babies as a social emergency when born. An optimal gender policy initially developed by John Money stated that early intervention helped avoid gender identity confusion. But of course, this lacks complete evidence. There's no reason we should be doing this. And early interventions have been proven to have adverse consequences for psychological and physical health. Why are we still doing this? Plus, since society and modern medicine have made it possible to completely erase that someone was intersex, people will go their whole lives without ever knowing that this was done to them. In addition, because intersex is a societally constructed term and idea, the idea varies so widely among doctors of what even is considered intersex and when and why you should intervene. So intersex varies so substantially that it could be anywhere from ambiguous genitalia to having the inside mostly of one sex and the outside of mostly another. And some even think that your brain has to be exposed to a mix of hormones in order to even count as intersex. There is hope in this movement, though. In 2011, Christian Volling, I hope I'm saying that right, of Germany became the first intersex person known to have successfully sued for damages in a case brought for non-consensual surgical intervention. That's amazing. Thank you so much for leading that movement. In 2015, Malta became the first country to outlaw non-consensual medical interventions to modify sex anatomy. The second court case was in Chile in 2012 and was adjudicated. It was involving a child and his parents. And then a further successful case in Germany taken by Michaela Robb was reported in 2015. So there are changes being made. It's just such a new movement, and I think that we're going to see a huge outburst of people saying that this is not right to do. In the end, just like with everything, I think it is important to note that some people with intersex traits self-identify as being intersex, and some don't. And it just depends on who they are, how they found out, what is the difference, what's abnormal, so to speak. A lot of people will also commonly use diagnostic labels and refer to their sex chromosomes with word choices that depend on their audience that they're talking to. Like with everything else, just use the terms that people are describing and using for themselves. It's not difficult. Okay. So this is such a complicated topic that I really felt like it was important to bring someone in on this one. So stay tuned, probably not next week because I'm going to do my corrections video on Two-Spirit, so stay tuned for that. But the following week I will actually be interviewing someone who was born having intersex traits. So if you're interested to learn more, if you have any questions that you want me to ask this person beforehand, please send them to me. I will filter those and then we can decide what we want to talk about. But I think that it's important to get the voice out from people who are actually living this and what it's like to deal with this stigma and the lack of choice on your own body. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can find me at AmourologyEd.net. I did redo my website recently, so it has all new fun things, so please check it out. You can also find me at AmourologyEd on all social media. You can join my wonderful Facebook group. It's a great community of people and growing. that like to talk about sex-related topics, relationship-related topics, alternative lifestyle-related topics, and sometimes just feel-good topics, or I need help with something topics. So if you're interested in that, it's at AmourologyEd on Facebook as well. There's a page and there's a group. Ask to join the group, answer the questions, be accepted. Yay! Like and subscribe so that other people can find this. Feel free to share it as well. And if you like what you're seeing, maybe tell a friend. Thanks so much.